Welcome, bienvenue. Welcome to this gathering of the Heritage Clan to talk about COVID-19 and the heritage sector. Today, we are walking you through the Toolkit for Action as part of our Shovelready Heritage campaign. So we'll give it a few minutes for people to sign in and get situated. If you'd like, while we're waiting for folks to sign in, feel free to identify yourself in the chat box. Let us know who you are and where you're from. So we have people signing in. Again, welcome to this session hosted by the National Trust for Canada to walk heritage advocates through our Toolkit for Action to be part of our Shovelready Heritage campaign. My name is Natalie Bull. It's my pleasure to host this session. I'll introduce our panelists in a moment, but I just did want to make a few remarks. Obviously, as we talk about recovery, economic stimulus measures for COVID-19, we need to remember that the health of Canadians is obviously still at the top of everyone's agenda. Also just a note that these are very interesting times. A lot of focus out there on the importance of diversity and inclusion as we talk about Black Lives Matter and important issues for our country and for the planet. Today we are going to talk about how the heritage sector can get its message out about supporting the Shovelready Heritage campaign. On April 23rd, over 20 organizations signed a letter to federal ministers proposing ways that heritage places can be an important part of economic recovery for our country. So today at this session, we're going to talk about what organizations and individuals can do to ensure that stimulus funds are earmarked for heritage projects. So I'd like to introduce today's panelists. Next slide, please. So we have Vanessa Arsenault, who is the National Trust Manager of Communications. We have Gil Barrows, no stranger to the National Trust. Gil is with Vox Public Affairs and has been an important advisor to the National Trust over the last few years on government relations and communications. Myself from the National Trust for Canada. We have Robert Pajot from the National Trust, who will be here manning the chat and the QA box, and Chris Wiebe, Manager of Government Relations and Policy for the National Trust. I also want to acknowledge all of the heritage leaders, leaders of organizations and heritage advocates that are on the call with us today. The National Trust can't do this work alone, so we really are very pleased to have so many heritage advocates here to be part of this, live action advocacy session. Next slide, please. So just a word about the National Trust. As a national charity, we have a number of programs that are about raising the grade for historic places and supporting the sector. We know that this work to rally the sector is incredibly important. I think getting the sector aligned and increasing our capacity to have a strong national voice and to be part of important conversations like the economic recovery of our country is an important a role that the National Trust takes very seriously. So just a few housekeeping notes. We encourage you to submit comments through the chat function. If you have questions that you would like to be addressed during the course of this session, you might want to use the Q&A box instead. Rob Pajot will be monitoring both of those for what's being said. I will mention as well that this session is being recorded and will be shared with all registered participants within 24 hours of this session. So if you lose your way in the advocacy action that we're running you through today, you will always have an opportunity to watch the webinar again and continue that action. So next slide, please. So just a brief recap about the ask. As I said earlier, about 20 heritage organizations, provincial, territorial, and national organizations signed on to a letter that was sent to 5 federal ministers urging the government to ensure that at least $200 million in the stimulus funding that we know is coming would be made available in a focused way for investments in older and heritage buildings. And we made the case that targeting the renewal, the retrofitting, and the adaptive use of revenue generating space, the creation of affordable housing and more, and in supporting the efforts of charities and nonprofits to renew cultural infrastructure and social infrastructure is really a very smart way to invest that stimulus funding. We know that it will create green jobs and be in line with goals for the environment, keep that funding close to home. Interesting to see movements in Europe and elsewhere talking about a new Green Deal and a renovation wave that I think is perfectly aligned with these recommendations that we're making to our governments. And we also know that poorly directed stimulus funding can have unintended negative consequences for historic places in our communities. We're not expecting $200 million or more named as a new heritage program. It's not a new national program that we're asking for. It's really about earmarking funding that in some ways may already be available in the system, or new infrastructure stimulus funding that will be announced. And it's not specifically about heritage. This ask is really about connecting the work that we do and the places that we care about with the creation of jobs and the economic renewal of the country after this pandemic that has really changed the situation for so many of us. And we know that the way that funding will be delivered will look different in every province and territory, and will be flowing at the municipal jurisdictions as well. Earlier in an earlier gathering call, we worked together to develop our government relations strategy around this ask. So let's go to the next slide, and I will ask Gil Barrows, our government relations advisor, to walk us through the pieces of that strategy, which are really the backbone of what we're going to run you through today with our advocacy action toolkit. Gil.
I will, as Natalie mentioned, I've been offering government relations advice to the National Trust for a few years now. I have never seen a better opportunity for the heritage sector. There's money flowing, and there's no doubt about it that if you play your cards right, you can get part of that money. The government tabled its estimates this week, and estimates basically are, how much money is the government going to spend? And they said $87 billion, mostly of it is for COVID-19 funding. And on top of that, there is a pool of money of about $190 billion that's earmarked for infrastructure. And only a fraction of that, out of the 190 billion, only about 30 billion has been allocated. So provinces and municipalities can get into that money, and heritage needs to make itself available, rather linked to that money to get into it. This is infrastructure money. It's not heritage money, it's infrastructure money. It's there, it exists, but heritage can qualify for it. But one thing we have to remember is, okay, there is a big opportunity here, but there is huge competition for this money. Everyone in Ottawa is lining up. Everybody from the big airlines to the mushroom growers of Canada to amateur sports to other NGOs are all lining up for this. So you got to make your case. The opportunity is there, but you do need to make your case. And again, remember that heritage is not the priority of the government, of any government right now. It's jobs. So you've got to link heritage and jobs together. Okay. I'm not sure what's on the next slide. Maybe we should change. Okay, you need to get your ducks in a row, as I say it. what I mean is you can't just say, you know, send us some money. We got to identify the delivery mechanisms. And for infrastructure, the money is in a pool at the federal government level, and provinces administer that money. So you've got to get to your province and to your municipality and make the case that there are projects here, they're heritage projects, but they're also, more importantly, they're shovel ready. They're going to create jobs across in your area and across the country. Next slide, please. So you need to get access to decision makers. And what you need to do is, at the national level, the National Trust is doing that. They are having meetings within a week, I believe, to speak to the offices of the Minister of Environment, which Environment deals with Parks Canada, and more importantly, the Office of the Minister of Infrastructure, where the money is. I think you at the provincial level or at the municipal level or at the local level need to decide how can you get to the provinces to get them to earmark some of that money for heritage projects. So you've got to find out, you know, you've got to make a specific ask to them, and to find out who they are, you either, if you have a relationship with anybody in your government, whether it's municipal or at the provincial level, ask them. Ask who's in charge of infrastructure spending in our government and who should I talk to. If you don't have a specific link to infrastructure people, and it'll be different people in different provinces. In some provinces, it may be the Department of Finance. In some provinces, it may be people who are specifically tasked with infrastructure. But you need to get, if you don't know who those people are, just use your contacts within your heritage contacts or any contacts you have, and just ask. Just ask, like, who do I go to? Next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Gil. So that brings us to the focus of our session today. We're going to walk you through the Shovelready Heritage Toolkit. Gil talked about getting the word out, substantiating the ask with all those shovel-ready heritage projects, and getting access to decision makers. So in real time today during this call, we're going to show the toolkit and walk you through the process of actually taking action on your own. And it's incredibly important that we have this really strong show of strength, show that there are many people out there who want to see infrastructure stimulus funding be used to renew and adapt and promote heritage places. So Gil talked about that wall of money. We're going to work together to get the word out. This is about mobilizing as many voices as possible, creating a sense of momentum, and then we will have to keep it up. So it's not just a one-time thing. So the toolkit, there is a link to the toolkit on our website in the chat box. I think it's the first chat, the first item in the chat box. You could connect to the toolkit directly from there. You'll see Vanessa, our communications manager, going in herself through this link to take you into the website. We also emailed the link to you in the message that you received to sign into this session. So there are 3 different places that you can see that that URL or click on the link to get to the actual toolkit. And so today what we're going to do is work together on getting the word out, helping you share the message far and wide. We're going to get your help to crowdsource the list of shovel-ready projects, and together we're going to make some noise on Twitter. So let's go into that toolkit, Vanessa, with the first piece, which is about helping you contact key influencers and decision makers to urge their support for this recommendation that heritage places form an important part of economic recovery programs. So there's an introduction there that we can scroll down past. And so what we're suggesting is that in order of priority, that you contact the premier and or the infrastructure minister or director of infrastructure in your province or territory. And so what we've got Vanessa's going to click on the draft message that can start your message that you write. So she'll show you what that looks like. You could just grab that that message and you could download that message to your own desktop, or you could just cut and paste that information, the draft wording for your message to reach out to the premiers. So there it is. We'll have a quick look at that message. So basically it's writing to urge the premier of your province to ensure that economic stimulus funding is earmarked for shovel-ready heritage projects. It quotes that letter that was sent to federal ministers and asks for a meeting. So we're telling them what we want them to do, and then we're also asking for a meeting. So you can grab that text, whether you've downloaded it or you're getting it directly. It was also in the email that we sent you earlier today. And then send that message. You can click on the link to your premier, which is provided in the toolkit. So Vanessa's copying that text, and then she's going to choose her premier, Doug Ford, drop that text in, customize it. If you're representing a particular organization, you might want to mention it. You might want to copy that message, certainly copy the National Trust. You could copy it to the Shovel-Ready Heritage email address, and which is provided further down in the toolkit. Go ahead at this point if you want to and copy your MP or other elected officials that should be aware of this, your local mayor, or alternatively, further down in the toolkit, we've set those options up. You could then forward your message on to these other email addresses. You might choose to attach the letter that was sent to the federal ministers. So that's provided as well. You could download that from the toolkit. Vanessa's just going to click on that and show you. So that you could, if you'd like to, attach that letter or use some of the contents of that letter to help make your case in your message to the premier. And I think it's interesting. So repeating what Gil said about the importance of getting the word out to provincial leaders. It's important as well to get the word out federally, but we think that this is where the decisions are being made. So as much attention and contact that you can make with provincial leaders as possible. So that's the first step in the toolkit. Et j'ai noté une question, est-ce qu'il y aura une version française? There is already a French version of the toolkit on our website, and we'll be happy to provide support to our Francophone colleagues in following through with these same actions. So let's scroll down. We've suggested that you start with the premier in your province. We've also provided links that will help you find the infrastructure minister or the director of infrastructure in your province. So in some cases, these are links to the infrastructure website for the government of your province. You may need to do a little bit of looking on those sites. We check them out, and typically the email addresses are there. These are not opening up into direct email addresses. But please, it shouldn't take too much effort for you to find those email addresses and send your message along. And then the third option, to send it to other elected officials and civil servants in your province, heritage, tourism, culture. So as Gil mentioned, this money will flow from infrastructure, but it's important also for you to make these connections with those other ministries, bringing the two ideas together, heritage and infrastructure, as we've done with this campaign. So then, and a fourth option, to connect with your provincial member of provincial parliament or a member of legislative assembly. So again, we've provided links to websites in your province that will help you find, if you don't already know it, the exact email address that you need to send this message to, or you may want to forward on the message that you sent to the premier to these other contacts. And then a fourth option for sending that message to municipal mayors and members of council in your in your city, in your locality. We've also provided some links to the municipalities associations. It might be useful to connect with them, or if nothing else, to find information about your municipal leaders in that website. And then last but not least, we've listed key federal officials. So you could choose to forward your message and possibly, express your support for the original letter that was sent in April to these ministers, infrastructure and communities, and environment and climate change. But as Gil has told us, we believe that the decisions are being made at the provincial and the municipal level in conversations with these federal leaders. So, but feel free to go ahead and do that. And we've also provided a link to a source to find contact information for your federal MP. Great, so that's the first phase of our Toolkit for Action, which is basically a very quick and simple letter writing campaign by email to get messages out to key officials who are part of the decision making about where infrastructure funding will flow, to urge them to ensure that historic places are part of the picture.
Yeah,
Gil?
Natalie, there's a question for Gil in the Q&A from Anne-Marie Met in Vancouver, specifically about whether what we just ran through, whether there's a benefit to, as an individual organization, to do this as an individual organization, or to work more collectively with other organizations in particular regions. Just sort of in terms of strategy, or should there be, in theory, perhaps it's both, or is there a nuance to the strategies that might want to be taken for individual organizations and a collective action? So maybe Gil, you could speak to that.
I would think that the more you can do, the better. And I've gone through this before. Trying to get a whole bunch of organizations signed on to a letter is, a lot of back and forth, editing and commenting and all that. It takes time, and as I said, there's a huge amount of competition for the federal money that's waiting there. So if you're going to find it takes too much time, just go individually and make your requests. But there's no doubt about it. A request, for instance, if you're requesting a meeting and you've got 4 organizations, you've got a better chance of getting a meeting.
The question from my end too. I mean, I'm wondering is you can send correspondence in through from the organizational level, but is it also beneficial for many of the individuals, board members, members of the organization, to also be sending their own letters in as individuals in writings and CCing their MP? I think that's probably another way to magnify the impact, is to also send it not just at the organizational level, but the personal level too, right?
Yeah, I agree, Chris. Numbers count, and the more noise you can make around this, the better, because you're always trying to cut through the clutter that's going into an elected official's inbox, and by the more you can demonstrate support, the more an elected official is likely to pay attention. Now, I will mention that, we're suggesting write to your premier, ask for a meeting. You're probably not going to get a meeting with the premier, but the point is that will start the ball rolling. What you can do is you wait a few days and then you phone into the premier's office, and somebody there is sorting all this out. And they will say, no, the premier can't meet. I've passed the letter on to somebody else. Or if they say, no, the premier can't meet, well, then you say, well, who could meet with us? So don't expect premiers to meet you, but do expect to be able to use that to leverage a meeting with someone. And the other thing is, when you're making your meeting request, feel free to use what the National Trust has put together as a template. And if you can tailor it at all, if you've got some specific project that is going to involve a lot of jobs, then, do tailor it.
Great, thank you, Gil. And why don't you take a minute now as well to say a few words about the actual conversation when folks do get a meeting with an elected official?
Yeah. The thing to remember is that you have, first you need to have a very clear ask. The objective here is not to have a meeting. The meeting is a means to an end, and the end is to get money earmarked for heritage and for specific projects. So you treat the meeting as the first step. But what you need to realize about meetings is that you have to be very clear about what you're asking, and you have to realize that most times you're not going to get a whole lot of FaceTime, or I guess you won't get any FaceTime. You may get some Zoom time or a call with an elected official, and you've got to do a couple things. You've got to make the point, this is what we as a heritage organization want, or me as an individual want, and then you have to find out, what does the government want? You have to figure out, well, are they at all interested in heritage projects? Have they even thought about it? Well, if they have, great. Now, what are the criteria that we need to meet to qualify for funds? And you've got to do this all in a very short time. Like with meetings with federal MPs or ministers' assistants generally last half an hour. That means you have probably 10 minutes to make your case and 10 minutes to have a discussion and then close it off. And I think you make a clear ask, you listen very carefully to what they're saying and get their advice on how to go about it. And then you need, at the end, you got to figure out, okay, what is the next step? Like I said, the objective here is not just to have a meeting. The objective is to get to the next step. Like, what do we need to do to qualify for money for heritage projects? And you listen to an MLA or an MNA or whoever you're meeting, a mayor or any other official, and be careful to listen to what they're saying. I've seen people that spend all their time getting their points across, and the official's nodding his or her head, and it all sounds good, and they go away, but nothing has really happened. Like, you need to understand what the government wants, what will qualify, and then what is the next step? Where do we go after the meeting?
Great, thank you, Gil.
Natalie, there's a question, if I can, before we jump in. Well, a couple things. Jerry, Gil, a quick question. Do you know how much of the funding will get flowing through the regional development organizations, such as ACOA? Do we have a sense of how much? We're saying that it's going to go through a lot of the existing federal mechanisms. Do you know? Do we have a sense yet?
Frankly, I don't know. We know that some will be flowing through the regional development organizations, agencies of government, but I don't know how much of that. There again, that's the question you need to ask, is like, okay, how do we get this money? Is it through ACOA, or is it through Western Economic Development, or is it through the provincial infrastructure and infrastructure person who's ever responsible for that? I don't know, but we do know some money will be flowing through regional development agencies, yes.
Okay, and I think just to another point in the Q&A box, which reinforces what you said earlier, which came in from Paulette Thériault, Paulette, notre directrice, une de nos gouverneurs au Nouveau-Brunswick, just that reinforcing the point that right now there are a lot of discussions happening at the between municipal governments and the provincial government.
Right.
So reinforcing what you said earlier, Gil, that your provincial or your municipal councillors and politicians are great allies right now to help you open doors at the provincial and then to the federal level. So she's just reinforcing that as a city councillor herself.
Very good point. That this takes it all the way down from the federal level, down to the provincial level, down to the local level, and the local levels where the action's going to act, where the project is actually going to take place. So that's a very good point. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So the next section of our toolkit talks about crowdsourcing the list of shovel-ready heritage projects, and that's part of Gil's recommendations to us that we need to substantiate the ask. So what are shovel-ready heritage projects? really anything that could create jobs using existing and older heritage buildings. So as Gail said earlier, it's not, the focus is not about heritage per se, it's really about the jobs that those projects at heritage properties could create. So it could be deferred maintenance. And again, we're making this up. We're deciding together what kinds of projects could be considered shovel-ready and that could attract the attention of government and attract some of that funding. Deferred maintenance, refitting seniors' homes and historic buildings, Indigenous heritage places, accessibility upgrades at existing and older buildings, creating affordable housing, projects on Main Street, adaptive use of existing buildings, developing tourism infrastructure at historic sites, places of faith, often not eligible for typical infrastructure funding. And I think we really want to make the case that there is potentially a lot of shovel-ready work there. We've even talked about potentially including digital heritage projects on this list. Anything where we could make the case that it is creating jobs. And so I think I'll invite my colleague Chris Wiebe to talk a bit about what the list is looking like at this moment. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. And before we jump into the list, I think just piggybacking on what Gil was saying about those meetings, it's great when it'd be powerful, as in other instances when we've gone to meet with federal officials or provincial or municipal, to be able to talk about projects that are in the ridings of those political officials, to make it real for them and help them to envision what you're talking about in terms of the impact that restoring or rehabilitating or getting a plan going around the reuse of a building or a property or a landscape in your area could make. So our list is growing, and we're getting closer to about 200 projects, and I'm sure there's many more around the country. And a lot of them are dealing with, many of them are related to upgrades on historic sites open to the public, and there's a few less on the private sector income producing kind of side. And then there's another portion too that's quite robust around municipal heritage projects, around city halls. There's a city hall in Smith Falls, Ontario on the list, and also a number of projects in Edmonton and other cities too. I would want to say that we need more in terms of examples to put forward in a number of different provinces. BC has done a great job. They've got a huge number there, about 75 or 80 projects. Alberta's about 10 projects. Saskatchewan, there's not so many. Manitoba has a very small amount too. Ontario's doing a bit better with about 25, 30 projects. And then there's a smaller number in Quebec. The Atlantic provinces need more, except for Newfoundland and Labrador, which has about 20 different projects that have been identified. And then we need some in the north. I know there are some projects in the Yukon, but we'll need to get those down on paper. One of the things that we're having challenges around is around the job creation, establishing the job creation numbers. And I've been working on that and talking with some of my colleagues in the preservation economics kind of sphere in the US and here in Canada too, to get a good number. And it's hard to find a kind of a rule of thumb to say a $7 million project will deliver X amount of person hours. But we're working on it, and we'll probably have something that can be a general rule of thumb to work with. If you have those numbers from people that are close to the project, that would be very helpful. I mean, some of them are saying, okay, they would produce 42 jobs, but it's also good to know about the time period over which those would extend. How many hours are we talking about? So there's a bit of elasticity there, and I'm working on getting some solid numbers there. We do know, though, that rehabilitation of historic places creates about 20% more jobs than new construction or road construction or other investments. And I think in a lot of cases in Canada that we have data for, it's substantially more. So I'm going to roll those all up and try to get to a way that we can collectively, in a solid way, methodologically solid way, arrive at a good way of characterizing the job creation impact of some of these jobs. although there'll be, variations in different places. Is that covering it off, Natalie, do you think?
Sounds good. No, thank you, Chris. And I know that question about getting access to the list. So we're sharing the list out weekly with the leaders of the provincial, territorial, heritage NGOs for their use in the conversations that they're having with provincial officials. But if anyone, I saw there was a request, anyone who would like to know some of the projects in their region that they could mention in their advocacy work, just send us a note through the chat or the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get that information out to you. And just before we jump into Vanessa showing us how to help crowdsource a bigger list, I just want to say that I think this work is incredibly worth doing for the current context, but also for the longer term, because I know as we in the past have advocated for a federal rehabilitation tax incentive and for more funding for National Historic Sites through the cost share program, we often cast about for the, where is that list of projects that demonstrate the need? So that's really what we're doing here collectively by crowdsourcing this list. So Vanessa, why don't we go back into the toolkit?
Can I just take a quick question, Natalie, if I could? Jacques asked the question, Jacques Archambault was asking the question, what's our time frame for getting people to contribute to the list? When would you like people, I know we don't really have, or do we have a hard cutoff date, or what's the strategy? I know it's as soon as possible, but is it a time frame?
I think especially as the meetings that we have coming up with infrastructure and environment, it's important for us to feel that we have a really geographically diverse and robust list. So really, the sooner the better. And as Gil had said, these decisions are being made quickly, and we want to have the ability to talk about the volume of projects out there on social media and through these communications that we're walking you through.
Because realistically, Gil, I mean, I'm thinking, I think the general thinking is that a lot of these decisions are going to be made this month, right? Or is it a bit more elastic than that in terms of, the federal rollout?
Oh, you're muted, Gil.
Oh.
Sorry.
Gil.
No, not a problem. The time frame is fast. That's what the government, I mean, we've got an unprecedentedly high level of unemployment here, and that's what the government is after. So I don't think it's going to be over in 30 days, but I think that, well, I'll go back to that, everybody's competing for this money. Everybody and their dog is out there looking for money. So the first people that line up with the best case have the best chance. It won't, certainly the government has not said this is going to be over in 30 days. That's not the case at all. But, some of that money is going out now, and the government is really making an effort to get more of the infrastructure money that's already earmarked for the provinces, municipalities. They want to get out and active. And I'm sure that the provinces do too now.
Great, thank you both. So Vanessa, take us back into the toolkit, please. And we will show you how to share our pinned tweet that is designed to engage as many people as possible in submitting these shovel-ready projects. So you just click on that link to share our pinned tweet. It will take you into Twitter. You can see it there. And I think most people on the line probably are already active on Twitter, so you can retweet it as is, or you can add your own specific comment to this tweet that is helping to call for more projects to be submitted. And so the link in the tweet will take people to, I think probably to the website, but to a special, to the list where they can complete the details of the project, or to an email address where they can just send us some information about the project that they believe is shovel-ready heritage. Great, so that's retweeting. So hoping everyone on the line is out there tweeting that pinned tweet out. And if we go back to the toolkit now, if you know projects at number 2 under crowdsourcing, if you know projects in your region or projects that you're involved with through your organization or personally that could be included on this list that are projects that would create jobs. You can click on the link to fill out a form that you're seeing here now on the screen, asking you for a brief description, location, the name of the federal riding if you know it, the type of project, importantly, estimated number of jobs. And as Chris said, it's not always easy to know how many jobs would be created by one of these projects, but we have had people estimating numbers, and it's better than nothing for us to have a sense of the numbers of jobs that these projects and investments represent. So we've also got a note here about estimated matching funding, additional outcomes. So how do we sell these projects as an important pool of investments for infrastructure funding? Great, Vanessa, that's good. So if you take us back to the toolkit, there's just another, again, a link to just an email. We've created an email address, shovelreadyheritage@nationaltrustcanada.ca. Anyone clicking on that link will be taken, it opens up into an email that will come to us so that we can make sure those projects get added to the list. And then the third item there, if you know developers or faith groups or local governments, anyone that might also have heritage projects that should be included on this list, just share the toolkit with them or share that email address and urge them to get that information in as soon as possible. So that's the second piece of our toolkit today, crowdsourcing the list of shovel-ready heritage projects. We're now moving into the third and final piece of action that we're hoping you will participate in, and that's about making noise on Twitter. So as we say here in the toolkit, it's a great platform for getting political and media attention. So we have set up some tweets that you can share. And so Vanessa is going to show you going into Twitter and searching to find existing tweets that are related to this campaign that have used that hashtag that we've created, hashtag shovel-ready-heritage. So there, Vanessa is typing that in and pulling up all of the existing tweets that relate to that campaign. And so you can scroll down through those and find, you can see a series of images of shovel-ready heritage projects here that have been submitted. I think some of these were featured in an article that Chris wrote for our newsletter last week. So we've set these up as ready-made tweets that you can retweet, ideally with a message, and we're going to urge you to make sure that you're tweeting at your premier, at infrastructure ministers, at those same leaders that we talked about earlier in this toolkit process. So Vanessa's tweeting at the Canadian Prime Minister, and maybe she will, in the toolkit, we've provided a list of the Twitter handles for all of the provincial and territorial premiers. So you can easily find their handles and include that in your tweet. You can see them here on the screen. All of those premiers are active on Twitter and pay attention when they get dozens of tweets about the same topic. So that's great. So go ahead and share those tweets that are relevant from your region, get them out to premiers and to others. And then you can also create your own posts. And in the toolkit, we've provided some sample language that you can use in your own posts, specific to projects in your region. And we've provided also a few additional Twitter accounts that you might want to mention. So we wanted to focus just on the Canadian Prime Minister to keep it simple, but you might also want to add the Twitter handle of the Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, or the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, or the Minister of Finance as you put those tweets together. So that's the action piece of our session today. I want to thank everyone very much for the time that you've taken to come in and do this, and I hope that you'll, those who weren't on the call today will be sharing the toolkit and making sure that it's out there and available for many people to use. And I just want to repeat that this is not the end, it's really the beginning, as we often say. It really is about follow-up. So you're sending out those emails requesting meetings. You do need to follow up, and again, it's about making as much noise as we can. Daily, I would urge you to go to Twitter and search on the hashtag shovel-ready-heritage and make sure that you're regularly retweeting and sharing the tweets that are being published on Twitter. And just also please keep us in the loop. So you can use any of our email addresses if you've got them handy, or use that Shovelready heritage@nationaltrustcanada.ca email address to let us know what's happening. So again, thank you sincerely for your time. We're all in this together, and we really need all hands on deck to make as much noise about this campaign and about the important role that historic places can play in the economic recovery of our country in the coming months and years. So any additional comments from Gil or from Vanessa or Chris? Why don't we move to the next slide, just to invite everyone to the next gathering call.
Oh, Natalie, Jacques Archambault was asking about whether people should CC the trust, the National Trust, in their correspondence with federal officials. And yes, please, so that we can get a good sense of where correspondence is going and where we need to push a little further. So yeah, great question, Jacques.
For sure, great, no, thanks so much.
Yeah, and if I can add to that as well, do the same thing on Twitter. If for anything that you're tweeting that is relevant to Shovelready Heritage, please make sure that you tag the National Trust Canada, so it's at National Trust CA. And to answer the question that was asked before, there will also be the tweets in French happening as well. So please, if you are a Francophone organization, to share these ones as well.
Merci beaucoup, Vanessa. So just a word about the next call. We're moving away from our Tuesday for a special gathering call on Wednesday, June 17th. It will be focused on Main Street renewal and with partners, including the Canadian Urban Institute. So stay tuned, join us for that call. You can register for that session and continue this important conversation with the heritage sector about the future of historic places and the impact of COVID-19 on our sector. Thank you very much. Thanks all.